10 point. That's
Yeah,
a,
when I was there.
Yeah, I see you. Thanksgiving night. We were out there. We stayed around
So I
our
had
place
a man
till
up
dark.
on the attic
Right before dark. We looked up and there was this
there we go. All right, good evening. It is 6 o'clock, and I'd like to open the Crime Control and Prevention District regular meeting for December 2nd, 2024. I'd like everybody to stand and face the flags and repeat after me. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. All right, I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving, and I want to thank all the board members and the residents who are here. As we get started, there's a few important points that are not in the agenda that I want to mention before we get started with the agenda meetings. First, I'd like to welcome Sherry Gale to the Board of Directors. Sherry, welcome. We are absolutely delighted to have you here. We are thankful for your time and your involvement. Sherry was at the last meeting that we had, although she was in the audience for that one. She and I met to bring her up to speed, and I've answered a few of her questions, and she's read through the minutes of the previous meeting, so I feel like she's up to speed. Secondly is Ms. Doherty resigned from the CCPD board as of last week, which is regretful. We felt like her experience in law enforcement would uniquely qualify her and would produce a voice that was on the board that had a lot of experience in what we were talking about. And I absolutely respect her decision. I wish her the best. And I hope that if circumstances change, that she would be open to re-engaging in this board or some other committee or some resident involvement in the town. All right, third, we need to have conversation. We need to talk. The town council, let me take a step back. 2015, Town of Copper Canyon created the CCPD. From 2015 to 2024, the board of directors was the same as the town council. The town council met and made decisions on behalf of the CCPD. And that is completely within the scope of the statute. There's nothing wrong with that. And it worked out just fine for the CCPD in Copper Canyon. But given that we created the police department, we wanted to take the opportunity to create the transparency, right? The feedback that we get at meetings, and I'm talking about at the town council meetings and after the town council meetings, and I don't want to speak for the council, I'm just speaking from my own position on the council. We get a lot of feedback, and it's all pretty consistent. It is we want more transparency. We want to have a better understanding of what's going on. We feel like things are moving too quickly. We don't always take the opportunity to explain what we're doing, right? And so the CCPD board is really a great opportunity to do that. It's an opportunity to create transparency, to solicit resident involvement, generally increase the awareness that people have of what we're spending money on. And especially for the police department. I mean, the police department costs a lot of our money. And we think that the residents should have involvement in it. They should have a say in it. There should be a high degree of awareness. And we really want to take the opportunity to create transparency and as much openness as we can. Those are what we want. That's why the town council created this. It was a step in that direction. It's a lot of extra work and cost. I've had a number of conversations with our attorney. In fact, at the last meeting, I had our attorney here. Each one of those points, there's a cost for all those things, right? And it's extra work, especially, I mean, Sheila and Troy, this is after hours for them, right? They should be home, but they're here in support of the CCPD, right? So if we don't need to do the CCPD, right? If our objective in creating the CCPD board isn't being met, then maybe we shouldn't do it. Maybe it's not a good idea. So that's the question that I think we need to discuss here, right? And so I'm going to open up public input here in a minute, but we might not vote today. I'm not saying we're going to, and I'm not saying we're going to vote. I'm not saying we're not going to vote, which is our agenda line item number 2, right? We may punt that. We may table it until the next time. I want to hear concerns, and we're going to hear those concerns. We're going to listen to those concerns in the spirit in which they're offered, right? And we're going to apply due diligence, real due diligence. So we'll take those concerns back. If we'll involve the attorney, Mayor Ron, maybe the town council, if necessary. We'll convene town leadership to be involved in this and carry out a due diligence process. Look, our objective was to create transparency. We believed that is really what residents wanted from us. That's what we heard in the feedback. So we did that. And the feedback that we're hearing is not at all consistent with that. It is generally resistance. And maybe some of that is that this is new to all of us. This is sort of a new process to us, and not everybody is up to speed yet on what we're doing. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe we're just not all aware of what those steps need to be. And if that's the case, then we'll get up to speed on all of those steps. Maybe the problem is me. I'm completely okay with stepping aside if that's what the problem is, or if I am the problem, right? I'll bring Harlan Jeffries into it as well. I should have mentioned Harlan earlier. Harlan Jeffries is a consultant. He provides counsel to Troy, the town administrator, has a lot of experience with other municipalities like ours. And maybe he's got some input on this, some ideas. Maybe he can hear those concerns in parallel with the attorney, with other members of the town council, with the mayor. So if the result of our due diligence is that the concerns don't warrant a change, then I may ask, if we choose not to vote, then I may ask this board to reconvene and vote later this month, potentially early next month. We've got some, Sheila probably has this off the top of her head, I don't know. There's some limitations on when we can and can't vote on this based on the start of our fiscal year. So we may just choose. One very practical outcome of this might be that we just punt the responsibility of the CCPD back to the town council. Town council was doing it for just fine for a long time. And if this isn't what the town wants, then it's not what we're going to do. It's a lot of work. It costs money, so we won't do that. What we're not going to do is dissolve the CCPD or let that sundown. We're not going to let that go away. That's a valuable source of funds that law enforcement needs. So we're not going to turn that off. We're just going to turn off the decision of this board, or the responsibility of this board to administer those funds and provide the fiduciary responsibility over those funds. And we'll kick it back to the board if that's the most practical outcome, if the concerns warrant that. So I'm going to open the public input here in just a second. And look, I want to hear concerns. I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to do my best to document those. And I might ask questions, which is sort of not typical in this scenario, but I'm going to ask questions. I want to encourage you guys to ask questions as well. Let's make sure we really understand what concerns people have. I don't want to dismiss anything. If it's something we've addressed before, then it's something we've addressed before, but we still need to document that was a concern. I ask that anybody who provides input, let's make it specific as possible. Okay. If there is concern with a conflict with the statute, which is Texas Local Government Code 363, if there's a concern that relates to that, well, we got to know what that reference is. Okay. We can't just say, well, it says in the three. No, we need to know exactly where in the statute you feel there's a concern. Okay. I ask that your comments have an objective. Okay. I understand that some people are upset about what we're doing. That's a problem that I'm concerned about that. But today, what we really want to hear is outcomes. We want to hear objectives. We want to hear input that can lead us to a solution. All right. So with that, first item tonight is public input, and any citizen may speak during the public input portion of the agenda for 3 minutes. Anybody who is here, citizens or visitors, are welcome to speak. Incidentally, no formal action may be taken by the board on items that are not on the agenda. Right now, I have two forms. One is from Ted Stranzik, and the other one is from Rudy Castillo. But I believe that somebody else may have input, and they are certainly welcome to speak. It's not important or critical, but I have this form in my hand for that. I want to add that some of this concern that I've heard is from a well-respected and knowledgeable citizen who knows about these matters, right? This isn't just sort of everybody's input. There is a basis for this, and so we want to hear about it, and we want to understand it. So, in order, Ted.
Yes.
Did you have a good Thanksgiving, by the way?
I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Board, thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Ted Stranzik. I live at 1020 North Ferry Trail Court. I have a question. Does Copper Canyon really need a crime control prevention district? After careful review and consideration of the administrative and legal statutory requirements called out in Texas State Law, Chapter 363, covering the creation of a crime control and prevention district, I think not. I want it clearly understood that the Herculean effort put forth by Councilman Dave Gibson and members of the CCP board to reinitiate the Crime Control Prevention Board is without question fully recognized and appreciated. However, it has become apparent to at least me and other residents that there is little justification for a crime control and prevention district in Copper Canyon. Given the statutory requirements by and for the creation of a CCPD is simply a bridge too far. Presently, we have the tax revenue to promulgate whatever crime control and prevention strategies we deem necessary through guidance and oversight by our present town council and police department. Instead of forging ahead with the complex statutory operation of the Crime Control Prevention District and Board, I really think that we need to change our strategy and designate a council member, i.e. Dave Gibson, to act on an official crime control and prevention liaison to the town and to the police and for the police department. Through the skillful interface between the council and our police department, Council Gibson can avoid the statutory and administrative compliance minefield embedded in Chapter 363. This would significantly simplify the goals and objectives of what our town needs with reference to crime control and prevention without constantly relying on cumbersome regulatory compliance requirements that include continuous legal oversight. My research indicated that neighboring municipalities with the CCP district have dropped it, primarily because of the significant administrative and budgetary compliance burden. Would this occur for us? There are several issues that need to be addressed. We need to follow the legal procedure to dissolve the district, and that isn't very difficult.
Can I ask you to hold on for, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ted. Do you mind just hanging on for 1 second?
Sure.
What did you just say, Sheila? I didn't
That
understand.
was a 3-minute limit.
Okay, yeah. Go ahead. Keep going,
Could you
please.
speak in that mic just a little bit better?
Oh,
Thank you.
yes,
Sorry, Mary.
you and I both.
Okay.
Again, there should be a legal procedure that we follow in dissolving the district, and there is. We need to integrate the crime control budget within the town's general budget. That would simplify the transfer of funds within the budgetary line items that have presently been created. We need to develop the duties and responsibilities of the Council Crime Control Prevention Liaison. That is a key factor in communications and developing all the strategies that would be covered under the CCPD, but far less complication. I also have a concern about the potential conflict of interest surrounding dual board membership by council members serving on 2 overlapping taxing entities. I think there's a definite conflict there.
You know, you and I talked about this Friday before last, Ted,
Yes.
and I did speak with council about that, and I didn't follow up with you on it, and I apologize for that. And it's the dual office holding is the statute that you're referring to there. The concern with being with a council member being a board member is the concern that you've got, that dual office
Yes.
holding. Okay. Our attorney didn't see that applying in this scenario because a board member isn't choosing to levy those taxes. Those taxes were levied by residents as on a vote. Okay, so it's not this board that levied that tax, and so it doesn't meet the definition of dual office holding. I should have followed up with you and mentioned that. But if we do dissolve this board, then every council member is also a CCPD board member.
Unless you dissolve the district.
If we dissolve, yeah, so when you say dissolve the CC, and that's one of the questions I'm going to ask you, and I don't want to interrupt. I know you've got additional points, and I want to hear that, but when you're saying dissolve CCPD, you mean dissolve the district, not just the board. You mean
Correct.
the district. Okay.
Correct.
So
And
that
come up
sacrifices.
with a much more simplified approach to crime control and crime prevention.
Okay, so that would, So that would reduce income to the town that is not ad valorem, meaning that the citizens aren't paying it. It's based on sales tax. So presumably a lot of these charges are borne by non-Copper Canyon residents. That results in $132,000 worth of income to the town. That is, I mean, it's money of a different color, so it has to go to law enforcement. Now, that income would go away if,
No, Dave, it wouldn't.
if we
don't,
dissolve the district.
No, I'm a former mayor and city attorney and police advisor. The sales tax is a set amount that the town can take, whatever the maximum is that a town can take.
Okay.
Copper Canyon can take,
Okay.
and they can use it on crime or roads or whatever they see fit to use it on. It is not something that happens because you set up the district.
Okay, I hear you. So Ted, sorry to interrupt you. Please continue with your points.
okay, well, I also took a look at some of that tax issues, and the good people of this town have passed the approval on taxes to cover law enforcement and crime prevention. And it's 2% of whatever. And they did it twice, 1% each time. And
Yeah, there was, so they voted for that tax to be associated with the CCPD for a period of 20 years, correct? Am I right? Yeah, for a period of 20 years, starting in 2015. No, 2020, excuse me. So the residents have already voted and said that there should be 1% of that tax should be CCPD, and that tax should serve to benefit law enforcement. And that was a vote by the residents in 2020. So I'm obviously not an attorney. I wasn't around or involved in the council. I know you were at the time, but I don't know what would be involved in dissolving that. So we would have to look into that there is sort of this concern with it's what the residents said they wanted. And so we would need to figure out a way around that. Maybe another vote or something along those lines. So we would need to figure out the mechanics and logistics of that.
you bring up a very good point. I think that whatever the issue is, we should define it, because I could very well be in error. But I think the people in this town are sold on crime enforcement, crime protection and crime control,
Of course.
and law enforcement. And if we had to tie that into the next general election as an item, I don't think it'd be turned down. Personal opinion,
Okay.
but for whatever that's worth. Again,
Do you mind if I just verify what I think I heard you say?
go ahead.
Okay. You feel like the CCPD, both the board and the district itself, should be dissolved because there's little justification for it. Did you have any specific references? You mentioned a statutory requirement. Do you have any specific references that you're concerned about there? It's okay if you don't.
How about chapter 363?
No, I mean specifically within.
I know, but the bottom line is, I've read that thing at least twice. And if you want chapter and verse, I could go back in and give it to you. But the bottom line is, there is significant issues with reference to budgetary requirements, 2-year budget, not a 1-year budget.
That's for the initial board.
But then it has to continue from that point forward.
So
It just doesn't go for 2 years and you do something different.
okay, so Ted, I want to address that point specifically because I also addressed that with our council, and that the 2-year plan is in reference to the initial temporary board. Following that, it's annual.
Okay, but where is the annual plan? You want to produce a budget.
Yeah,
Where's the plan?
I hear you. Okay, so that's another point of concern that you have there.
Yes.
Okay. We need to change the strategy, create this liaison role, although I'm not sure that it would be necessary if we dissolve the CCPD. You mentioned the cumbersome legal requirements and the conflict of interest. Are there any other points that I overlooked there?
I think it's implied by what I'm saying that it's going to be a costly transaction. And I think we could use that money much more efficiently directly for law enforcement than for operating overhead and attorney fees.
Fair enough. All right.
And then in conclusion, I would simply this procedure, if we were to set up a liaison, would greatly simplify our town's crime control and prevention strategies, their implementation, and eliminate administrative compliance and burdens inherent within the Texas State Law 363.
Okay, got it. Thank you for your input, sir.
Thank you very
As
much.
always. Yeah. All right, Rudy, it's on you. Ted, thanks for your input. There were some new items there that we haven't previously discussed.
Good evening, everyone. Rudy Castillo, 3735 Lancier. I think your introductory comments were a great segue into what I wanted to cover, and I appreciate the openness with which you opened the meeting, because I think it was lacking, frankly. And any comments I make are totally in the interest of making our town better and having those of you that choose to volunteer to do things for the town do so with the spirit of transparency and in an effort to do what volunteers usually do, which is to do the right thing. I started getting into this a few months ago when this all started, because I had some citizens who were under the misconception that I was still involved with the police department asking me a lot of questions. And since I didn't know, I thought, let me start looking into this. And frankly, I was surprised and shocked at how complex and directive Chapter 363 is.
Okay.
I've read it quite a few times, trying to understand the ins and outs. My biggest concern overall for all of you and for the town is that this is a serious deal, because you're dealing with tax monies.
Of course.
Which is why you're required to have a bond when you sit up there.
Absolutely.
Which is why there are so many rules about how you handle things. I suspect that level of seriousness and the fact that a lot of legal constructs surround what you may and may not do are the reasons that it's becoming increasingly difficult to have people jump up and volunteer to do something that can be so complex. I
think that it's probably, if I could add something to that, I think that it's, I think that there is, look, I've asked a lot of neighbors if they would be willing to do this, if they would be willing to participate in this board, but also in committees, right? In the, we had openings on committees, and like, come on, I've done this since July, so I've got, a vast 4 months of experience at this, right? But in every meeting that I come to, it's the same people here. Now, surely other people are interested. Other people care about what we're doing down here because it affects them. So surely they must be interested. So why don't more people come to these, right? And the answer is toxicity. They feel like if they were here, they would be attacked, that they would get yelled at. They don't want to be involved. And I'm like, well, maybe we need some more faces down there, right? Maybe, look, I'm sorry to take up some of your time. I'll make sure that you're able to say everything you want to say, but I think this is a really important point. Daniel Andrews, September 23rd, he gave an amazing speech here. And that has resonated in my brain since you said it. And he talked about that space right there being a sacred 4 square feet, because look, I was in DC, I was at the Capitol 2 weeks ago. There isn't a sacred 4 square feet there. I was in Austin this summer, same thing. No sacred 4 square feet there either, right? It's here. And the reason is that those structures are republics. They're democracies, but they're republics. This is a democracy. And we've got the opportunity to be like a hyper democracy here, right? We could have citizen involvement in absolutely everything we do, because all you have to do is come down here and stand there and talk about what you like or what you don't like, right? But that's not what people do, right? They assume that's for other people. I don't want to have involvement. And the feedback that I'm getting is that it's too toxic, right? And I think that there is, and look, it's not my position to discuss what happens in town council meetings, but I got to tell you, I appreciate the level of decorum that everybody has managed here in the CCPD board meetings, because it is a different environment than it has been at town council meetings. So I think that that's a component of it. Why do we have problems with people coming down here and engaging and being part of the process? Participating in the only real way that they can participate in democracy. It's too toxic. They don't want somebody to come be yelling at them about something, right? I kind of get that, right? I kind of get that. But continue, please.
Well, since you brought that up, I have to address it.
Please do.
I sat on the council for over 4 years.
And I
never
appreciate-
experienced that kind of toxicity.
I appreciate
not
and
see
value
that.
your service, by the way.
It was a blast. But
Everybody
I
speaks about
disagree
you
only
in sort
because
of reverent terms. By the way.
I rarely, if ever, maybe one meeting where people were very agitated about some given issue. Usually it has to do with zoning. Otherwise, everybody is overall extremely polite. They're trying to get their point across. I believe that every member of the council, when I was there, was doing their absolute best to understand the person sitting in this fabled 4 square feet, trying to understand their position. But that's neither here nor there, because I really want to discuss this issue. I want to address real quick the transparency issue, and I want to give you a sense of what those people, meaning me and the other citizens, perceived with what has happened here with the CCPD.
And these are people that gave you
Either
gave you
people,
direct
let's just
feedback.
use myself,
Okay.
me.
Okay.
When I looked at it and I started watching the meetings, as you know, I've been attending the meetings. My very initial thought when it was announced at the council meeting that we were going to have this police board, remember, I was a councilman.
Right.
And I was like, oh, good, coffee and donuts with the chief once a quarter. How fun. Everybody gives them their input. I honestly thought that. And the reason was I had never heard of the CCPD. Sat on the council for over 4 years. Recently, that's fact. And I've talked to Ted, and I believe that he has the same opinion. I've gone back and looked at meetings, the agendas, and the minutes back to 2020. Because I thought, I know I was here for every single meeting. So what happened? Was I asleep? Did I miss something? I can't find anything. I can't find any mention of the CCPD. I have recently found documentation from the 2015 establishment of the CCPD, the 2017 portion where the board, the original 7 members, were then moved over to the council. After that, from 2019 on, because that was a 2-year extension, other than a citizen vote, not much happened. And there's almost no mention of it. And forgive me, I don't want to get into, I mean, you asked for opinions about the perception, and I'm telling you what it looked like
I'm not.
to us.
Rudy, I'm not pushing back on you. I want to hear it.
So all of a sudden, shortly after I resigned, there's this big push to start this new project. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder where that came from. Turns out it wasn't new. Turns out it's been here since Mayor Sue's time.
Right. Yeah.
I'm like, this is very confusing. What's the rush? And if you please go back and watch the videos of the last 2 meetings, there is a sense of rushing to get this through, get this financial situation squared away. As a citizen who doesn't know the ins and outs, I'm going, why? What's the rush? And I'll tell you why. Because that money used to live over in the general fund. I know because I worked with Donna Welsh when I was helping set up the police department. And those were funds that we earmarked specifically for the police department because it was such an initial expense, knowing full well after Donna explained to me that we could not use those funds for anything else because of the voters and how they had earmarked this money. It had to be used for safety and security, which makes total sense. So the transparency issue left at least me with questions of what is going on? What's the rush? Why all of a sudden are we doing this when we're supposed to be doing it all along? Where were these? You say that the board was the council. I'm not sure it was. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. That was the past. My feeling is the same as Ted's. We have this board of which I have yet to see 7 full members sitting up here. Hasn't happened yet. And to me, this document, 363, requires 7 members. We don't have 7 members, which also brings, and you may have different opinion from the attorney, who of course is going to win that discussion. That's fine. My goal is to ensure that the town conducts business in accordance with state law, because we're dealing with tax monies.
Sure. Well, I mean, frankly, almost every dollar we spend is tax money, right?
Well, of course, but
Yeah.
this was voted on specifically for this particular
I hear you. Got it,
project, which is why I'm addressing it. What the other point I want to emphasize, and forgive me for taking so much time, is Ted brought up the conflict of interest, and I totally agree with him. I believe that having any council member, doesn't matter who it is, sitting on this board is a conflict of interest for this very simple reason. Let's say that you guys have a contentious issue in your financials on some year, not today, not tomorrow, and the 2 council members disagree with what the board wants. It now goes to the town council to get voted on. Guess what? Those 2 board members that are also councilmen are not impartial. That, by definition, is a conflict of interest.
I hear what you're saying. Yep.
It has not, and I know that the attorney said you could do it. Just because
He
you
did.
can do it doesn't mean you should.
Fair.
I also understand the issue that we don't have volunteers. I get that. Thank you so much for your time.
Right. Yep. Very good. All right. Sue, you've got some input?
Yes. You'll have to tell me whether I'm speaking into this or not. I'm never sure. Is that all right? Okay. There's one advantage to being a mayor for 14 years, a police advisor for 6, on the Denko 911 board as vice chairman for 11 years, and an attorney. The requirement for even establishing this board is a minimum of 7. We had a meeting, and we had 5 people here. And at the end of the meeting, one of the board members appointed resigned. We had a second meeting, and we had another person who had been appointed to the board, a detective from Louisville Police Department, resign. So we're back to square one. We still don't have a legally formed board, period. So I'm going to vote no on the minutes when we get to it because we don't have a board. One of the things I've done in the last 2 weeks is talk to other mayors, other police chiefs, other city managers. They got rid of the CCPD board years ago, and they don't have it any longer. And it doesn't matter whether it's Bartonville, not Bartonville, Double Oak, which is smaller like us, or big cities like Flower Mound or Prosper, or the city of Denton's police chief said, we got rid of that a long time ago, Sue. He's now the police chief of a town of 28,000. They don't do that because it's a duplicate effort. And you also are trying to comply with a law that's over 25 years old and hasn't been amended. And it is almost impossible to stay within those legal boundaries. And it's ridiculous to even do it if you don't have to. So, and I did talk to Harlan. Actually, he and I were together today at a luncheon. And he said, Sue, we didn't do that because you're going to have a conflict of interest sooner or later. You've got 5 council members. You've got 7 on the CCPD board. Somewhere down the line, you're going to disagree. And there you get into a squabble in the town and divide the town. So it doesn't make any sense to do it from the standpoint of your volunteers or the money. The money's there anyway. And the council can decide the money for the police department. It could do something that's crime prevention, night out or something, or ride with the police or whatever they might do. And you can do that without all the drawbacks of the conflicts of interest or of using money to try and do the administrative part of it. You don't have to do that at all. So why? But anyway, that's why I'll probably
Okay.
abstain from any vote.
That's fine.
So,
All right, so I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. So you met with or talked to police chiefs and mayors of other communities, and they've all got rid of their CCPD board in favor of their town council acting as the board?
yes.
Okay. So
And they don't even call it the CCPD board.
okay. But they make decisions about how the CCPD funds are going to be allocated.
The funds are there in the general budget usually, and the council has all control over how those funds are spent.
Yeah, got it. So they are acting as the fiduciary for those funds.
Yes.
So they do have sort of an overlapping responsibility with with this board of directors, if you will. And then you also spoke to, and I'm not questioning you. I'm just making sure I understand you. Second piece was that you and Harlan met, and
We didn't meet for that purpose. We were at a luncheon together.
oh, got it. Okay. And in that meeting, Harlan, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Harlan suggested that there would ultimately be disagreement between citizens and this board. And as a result, this board doesn't really need to exist, is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay. But you're not suggesting.
You're jumping through hoops when you don't have to.
Okay. So, well, you're right. We don't have to. The council never needed to. The reason that the council chose to create the board was to create an additional level of transparency, to create, since the police department it's a lot of money, there should be more resident involvement, resident input, and there should be, participation. That's the reason the council did it. Yeah, of course, the council doesn't need to do it. They never needed to do it before. They didn't need to do it within your tenure. But they chose to do it because of the increase of cost for the police, and to sort of solicit this additional level of involvement to create the transparency and openness. So
They can do it so much simpler. We've had
Okay.
workshops on roads when we had asphalt roads that we didn't know they were crumbling. They were 25 or 35 years old. We didn't know if they had a base. We didn't know how thick they were. So we had a workshop, and people would bring their input, and you had plenty of transparency. It could be the whole council there or just a couple of council members there. But it was a way for people to express their opinion and be heard. But you don't have to do it through complicated legal jump holes like the state 25-year-old plus statute.
okay. Any other points?
No, I did want to explain why I will abstain, because we don't have
Yeah.
a legal board yet.
Okay, I hear you. Incidentally, so that everybody knows, that was discussed at the last meeting, and council, Stan Lowry, believed, based on his knowledge of the statute, that we did have a complete board, and that a majority would be a legal majority. So,
And I think I would ask for a second opinion on that,
okay.
and a written opinion.
Okay, got it. So Dale, Sherry, any questions for what input we've heard?
Yeah.
Dale?
So I guess to summarize what I've heard tonight is the board basically is not needed per se to do the operation of running, or not running, but overseeing this situation. We're not needed at all. On the other hand, the council was trying to give more I'll use the word distance between themselves somewhat and the citizenry. So the citizens could come, view their points, make their known situation or their request or their act or questions or whatever. But the possibility of conflict outweighs all that is what I'm hearing to some degree. It may be, as I'm hearing, I know as a councilman, when we talked about this, the goal was to make sure there was never any impropriety or even thought of an impropriety about the conflict between the council, the police department, the council, or the citizenry. It was kind of like putting a buffer in favor of the citizenry. But doing that, we're running a risk, as I'm being told, of conflict. And that appears to, not to me exactly, but I'm listening, to be more cautious about the conflict than we are the perception of generating this buffer between the citizens and the council or the staff. Am I getting that about right?
Yeah, I think that's
pretty well summarized.
I think that's,
So-
I mean, I think that's, if we were gonna look at the thrust of the comments, yeah.
So
I
we're
think that
looking, to me, I'm a simple guy. I'm not a highly educated guy, but I can add 3 and 3. And I get 9 every time because I multiply. My dad told me, he said, don't ever worry about subtraction and division. Only worry about adding and multiplying. That's all you ever need to know. So that's a joke, but
I
if you
like
didn't
his
get-
style.
but that's my dad. So I'm trying to weigh the conversation tonight because I respect what you say. I respect what you're going to say or didn't say, but I will respect it down around the table. I hear Ted and Rudy, and I highly respect those gentlemen. I don't know if we're trying to head off a disaster that may be forthcoming, maybe not this year, the next year, or whatever, in favor of eliminating the board. Well, if the board is not needed, then why have it? I guess that's the simple to me. I mean, why? I mean,
Well, the reason was transparency.
I understand that, but
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. If it's not needed for transparency, then it's not needed. And if we're not meeting that duty, then maybe we need to take another look at it a different way. But I do know the pulse of the council at the time. I guess this has always been part of the overall budget, but it was always kind of earmarked aside. This is what it's got to be used for, even though it was commingled in the bottom line with the bank account. Well, that's just like having a line item for hospitalization, one item for radios. It's just a line item to me.
You mean it's fungible, not
The funds, that's what I'm talking about.
fungible, not commingled.
But they are, when you add them up, they're a line item.
Yes.
But when you add them at the bottom, it's still, you got so many dollars. I know they're not together.
Yeah.
We have to spend them for that money, but that's designated.
Definitely.
Am I
Yes.
hearing that right?
Right.
Yes.
What you don't want to do is spend it for useless administration and extra legal fees.
Okay.
Trying to comply with state law 363 is a nightmare. Why do it if you don't have to?
Well, then we have to excuse me for my asking, don't we have to abide by that law regardless if the council's in charge or this board is somewhat in charge?
You have to abide by that law if you form a CCPD.
So that
which
way.
you haven't
okay.
even done yet.
So,
We can't even get to 7 members.
so,
And I asked for a written opinion, and I think you'll find it will come out different.
okay. So in other words, now I'm just listening, like I said. So if we don't have the board, then that all goes away.
That's right.
So,
We don't have to do anything with 363. We just, it's back there in the state books forever and ever. And people don't go look for it because they don't want it. It's just complicated. And it takes something as simple as a council deciding
Yeah.
how to spend these funds, the sales tax. A lot of it comes from people who have businesses in town, sell things and have a sales tax. But the money is the same, except you're draining off money for administration and legal advice, which you don't need to do.
I want to be clear though, if we choose to continue with the district, the CCPD, which I'm not 100% sure that's our decision. I mean, the residents voted to extend that for 20 years. So I'm not clear on what we could do to get rid of that. But in the event that we have it, which we do today, we do have to comply with 363. That's to your point. Right. We still have to comply with it. There are fewer steps that we have to worry about complying. Is correct? So you're not suggesting that we can ignore 363 going forward if we choose to dissolve this board?
It could be. I would want a written opinion from an attorney who is familiar with CCPDs to give that answer.
Got it. Well, if we're receiving tax money for it, I mean, I feel like there's probably, I feel like our attorney's probably going to have a pretty strong opinion about how we comply with state statutes. So, and whatever that is, we will comply with the statutes. All right. Does anybody else have input, thoughts, suggestions? Rudy, what you got?
Talk to us.
We get an extra 3 minutes now.
That's fine.
Boy, I love hearing this conversation and I greatly appreciate it. I think that if I might suggest,
Sure.
from listening to you guys discuss, one of the problems that everybody has, including myself, because I've read this 4 or 5 times and there are some issues with it. We're not really sure of what exactly it is specific to this law that we're trying to understand. Let's say that the council agrees with the decision that you guys make to say, hey, maybe we don't need this board. And the conflict, the only conflict that's been mentioned that I heard about was conflict of interest from having council members on here. That was the only one. Nobody's questioning anybody's honesty or how they're going to handle the money. The issue, it goes to...
Thank you for commenting that, by the way.
The issue goes to what happens when there's further downstream a problem between the 2 council members and the rest of this board. And now you get to vote on it again. And that can create a conflict. And from my opinion, I give you a great example. Yeah. But the issue comes down to, first, with legal, we need to find out what are our options as a town. Can we, because I believe what you were referring to about the 20 years has to do with the tax that the citizens approved, which is a separate issue, I believe, from the CCPD. Could be wrong.
The CCPD is the tax. Okay, so those two, the name of the tax is CCPD.
Okay.
The differentiation point is the board. Okay, so we can have the CCPD. We can enjoy the benefits of that revenue stream, right, and not have a board. Now, we do actually have a board. It's the town council.
Which
correct?
I think, in my opinion, would be the best solution. And for a small town like us with very limited commercial income, it doesn't make sense to spend extra money on this board with a potential attorney like we had last time. More money going out that we could use for our police department,
100%. For
our vehicles,
absolutely,
for any other projects that we want. That money, as you said, was a line item already. It was already in our budget. Right. So we're not talking about, at least, we don't want that money to go away. I made a promise to that gentleman sitting back there that we would do everything as a town to support him and his police department. And I certainly hope we will continue to do that. So I want that money to stay in there, designated for safety and security, which is its goal.
Yeah, and I think another important point there is it's not, and I'm sure it's implied in what you're saying. The commitment is to the residents of Copper Canyon.
Of course, no,
right?
Of course.
It is to Roger, of course.
The police department that
absolutely
everybody enjoys having.
But everything we do is reinforcing the commitment to the residents of Copper Canyon, right?
So I think that the goal is to keep it as simple as possible.
Yep.
Both for expense, for time, people's time, and to just keep it simple. If the concern is transparency, there really shouldn't be, because the budget is published every quarter.
I agree with you 100%.
And if a resident, let me give you a quick example. I actually was the law enforcement liaison officer on the council for years. I worked with the sheriff, and then I started working with the police department. So that position does or did exist. And all it takes is that individual and some volunteer citizens to truly sit down for coffee and donuts with the chief once a
Sure.
month and say, hey, chief, what are your needs? What are you looking at? They give him some feedback. Hey, an example would be some of the volunteers that do Crime Watch.
Mhm.
They're the perfect people to sit in here and go, chief, here's what we're noticing.
Yep.
And then the chief can say, hey, you know, we're a little bit short on funds for signs or for this or for that. And then you say, hey, let's suggest to the mayor and the council a budget that includes these items that can come out of that amount of money that's already being taxed. And it's very simple. It's very transparent. We don't have a stack of paperwork from the state that every time you read something, we have to check with the attorney to see if we're doing it right. So anyway,
Got it.
the idea is, I think that might work if you guys can figure out how do we back the clock up to
Got
where
it.
the council does it or somebody that's not subject to all these
Yeah.
crazy rules.
All right, Rudy, thank you for that, Rudy. And thank you, Sue.
Ted wants
Yeah.
to say something.
Ted,
Can I clarify something?
I've got 4 minutes to close this up.
Let me take 1 minute.
You got it. Perfect.
I have in front of me the Crime Prevention District discussion and approval for that tax. And
Okay.
I just want to read it so everybody understands it.
Is this 22013?
This was in September 14, 2015.
I'm sorry, the ordinance number. What's the ordinance number?
Uh,
Is it the one I emailed you?
I know, I don't, for some reason, it's not.
Ted, is it the
mentioned
one that I
on
emailed
these
you?
Minutes. And I understand what you're asking, but it's not here.
Okay.
But it says, a ballot proposition, this is for the ballot.
Mhm.
A ballot proposition to adopt a sales and use tax for the proposed district at the rate of 1% dedicated to crime control and prevention programs.
Okay.
Now, that's for the proposed district. Now, obviously, it doesn't say the board, it
Right.
says for the district.
Right.
Now,
Yeah, nobody disputes that
and
point.
by the way, how many dollars are we talking about here? We don't have a lot of commercial business in this town.
No, it's revenue this year is $132,000.
Are you
It's
sure that's right?
yeah,
I
absolutely, I'm
find that to
sure.
be,
Ted, it's published in the budget. This is a point that you and I have already discussed, and I've got 3 minutes to close
Okay.
this up. So if I'm gonna look, I appreciate everybody's input to this.
Absolutely.
I don't want to speak for everybody on this council or on this, this board. I don't know that I've really got a strong understanding or belief one way or another today, sitting here right now. And honestly, it's not up to me to make that decision. We need to do our homework with this, right? I need to take this commentary back, these concerns back, and we need to do due diligence. And that due diligence is the responsibility of the town leadership. So that is council. It is Harlan Jeffries. It's the town council. It's the town administrator, the town secretary. It's town leadership as a unit needs to look at all this, do due diligence, figure out if the CCPD board was a good idea. We felt like it was a good idea because we heard that there wasn't enough transparency, that people didn't have awareness of all the things that we were doing. And I think what I'm hearing is that even the town council at sometimes didn't have full awareness of what was happening there. I don't know sitting here right now which way makes more sense. I need to take that back to leadership and find out what makes sense. And look, if it turns out that these concerns are warranted, no problem. We have lots of options. It's not just a few things that we can do. There's a spectrum of things that we could do as a result of that, up to and including dissolving the board and reverting the fiduciary responsibility for the taxes back to the council. Look, the council, they, including me as one of those members, wanted this to be an opportunity to reduce concerns that there wasn't transparency, reduce concerns that there wasn't enough public awareness. If it's not serving that purpose, then we're not going to do it. We didn't meet the objective. It's no big deal. So with that, I just as a function of the logistics of this, we do need to approve. I want to move to the first regular line item, which is the approval of the November 18th CCPD meeting minutes. We were all here during that time, so I understand that you wish to abstain from that vote. Would anybody be willing to make a motion to approve those minutes for November 18th?
I don't know if that's a point of order, but I want to ask the question right quickly, if I may, please.
Please do.
If we don't have a quorum, board members, can we even do this?
Yeah.
So we may not even be able to do this either.
Sharon was not present, so she'd have to
She was
abstain.
present.
Well, she was president, but she was not
the
present
board.
here.
I wasn't on the
She
board.
wasn't on the board.
Right,
That's
and you
correct.
can't vote just because you were present.
Okay, so look, we'll table, we will table all three items following the due diligence with town leadership. We may or may not choose to reconvene this board in a future meeting to vote on the budget or future meetings or the approval of the minutes. But more importantly, look, to me, this responsibility, town council, this board, it's a new experience for me. But I'll tell you that the piece of it that is most interesting to me, that is most exciting, that's frankly the most fun, is receiving feedback, right? When we had an issue with some code compliance, and you know what? I got to talk to a bunch of my neighbors about what they were concerned about. And they talked about a lot of things. And it was clear that these people just didn't feel like they had a place to talk about these concerns because they didn't want to come down here at 7 o'clock on the second Monday of the month. And it was kind of refreshing to open that conversation. I felt like it was for them too. Ted, you and I have probably spent 4 hours on the phone together. It's been good to hear your feedback and hear your concerns. And candidly, I also feel like it's been my responsibility to make sure that you felt like I was taking those concerns seriously. Not just concerns here, but also concerns about other town council business, right?
I consider it to be a great example of transparency, and I appreciate the interface and the feedback. And unrestricted, you said your say, and you called out what I was doing, and that's what we need to do with all of our residents.
Very good. And look, Rudy, your input is highly valued, and not just as a resident, but someone who has immense experience in this body and in this town. So
And the best interest of the town.
correct. And
Always the best interest.
You.
Yeah.
and Sue, I'll second all of those comments to you as well. So with that, I'm going to table all three regular items. Sheila, sorry. Not going to entertain any future items at this point, but I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion, we adjourn with all the items as before mentioned.
Yep.
And I just want to say also, I've really enjoyed tonight at being transparent and upfront with everybody. And I just want to say thank you for your participation. And it doesn't go unnoticed. And I say thank you, but I do make the motion, we adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
There we go. Do we need to vote on that, or can we just accept that it's adjourned? All right, meeting adjourned at 7:04. Man, it's been a long day for me, frankly.
Getting early.
12:04, this was a 5-hour meeting. It's exhausting. Thank you all for being here.